I never asked to become someone's prey. Back then, I lived quietly in a shabby studio apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, balancing mediocre jobs and a handful of mundane obligations. My life was anything but exciting, and I rarely ventured beyond my comfort zone. Yet everything changed the night I went for a routine drive toward the coast. A black SUV tailgated me on the deserted highway, flashing its high beams until I pulled over in confusion. 3 armed men dragged me from my car, pressed a needle into my neck, and thrust me into a nightmare I had never imagined could exist. When I awoke, I lay on cold concrete in a dimly lit cell that smelled of antiseptic and stale urine. That was where I met Alexandra Hale, though I only knew her by reputation at first, whispered in terrified voices by other captives. She was the owner of the mansion above us, a place fortified by high walls, cunning traps, and enough money to bribe an army of security forces into silence. Rumor had it she was an heiress with a taste for the extreme, big game hunting in exotic locales, private tours in war-torn countries. But eventually, even those thrills lost their spark for her, or so the stories went. She craved something more forbidden, more dangerous. Her final pastime became hunting humans for sport on her sprawling coastal estate, with cameras rolling and a personal audience of twisted elites. Some captives had been here for weeks, awaiting their turn in her sick game. Others, rumored to have tried escaping, simply vanished in the night. The guards never explained anything. They fed us stale bread and watery soup, menaced us with threats, and laughed at our pleas for mercy. My fear kept me paralyzed, but something deeper than fear also grew, an urgent rage that slowly replaced my disbelief with a burning will to survive. One afternoon, 2 guards escorted me from the cell block into a lavish study scented with leather and pipe tobacco. That was when I first set eyes on Alexandra Hale in person. She was tall, poised, dressed in a crisp, expensive suit that contrasted with her predatory smile. She wore her dark hair slicked back, her unsettling green eyes cutting through me. Behind her desk stood mounted trophies, lion heads, exotic hides, even a framed photograph of her posing triumphantly over some defeated beast in a distant jungle. "I'm bored," she said, voice cultured and patient, as if explaining an inconvenience. "My hunts have been too predictable lately. You look resourceful. I'd like to test you." Then she calmly spelled out the rules: would be released into the wild expanse of her estate, given 1 hour to run, and after that, she and her team would hunt me down. If I somehow evaded capture for 3 days, I might, she claimed, earn my freedom. Otherwise, I would join the ranks of the nameless who had perished for her amusement. And so, that same evening, I found myself wearing mismatched clothes, a small pack with a bottle of water, and a head start that felt like a sick form of courtesy. The guards marched me past stables, gardens, and a high-tech gate that opened onto an expanse of dark pine forest. Once I crossed that threshold, my heart pounded with such ferocity I feared it would burst. One of the guards sneered, "Better run," and I ran. My first steps were frantic, fueled purely by terror. The estate sprawled for miles, with rolling hills, ravines, and concealed vantage points. Cameras were rumored to be hidden among branches and rocks, all feeding back to Alexandra's command center. The sky above was already dimming, and the wind carried the brine of the nearby sea. Each breath came sharp, but I pushed harder, stumbling over root-laced soil and occasionally hearing the eerie cry of birds. When I finally dared a glance over my shoulder, the mansion lights flickered on the horizon like a sinister beacon. That was the moment it struck me that I was truly being hunted. If I hesitated or made a mistake, I would die. By the time the hour expired, I was deep in the woods, caked with mud from a creek bed I had scrambled through in hopes of obscuring my scent. My chest heaved, and my pulse pounded in my ears. In the far distance, an air horn roared. My pursuers were unleashed. My only plan was to keep moving, never linger in one place, and hope I could survive the night. Yet I soon discovered that Alexandra's men, some ex-military, others mercenaries, fanned out in practiced formation. Flashlights and search dogs formed a wide net, gradually tightening. Through gaps in the trees, I spotted silent drones floating overhead, scanning the terrain with their motion-sensitive cameras. Each time I heard the distant bark of dogs, I bit back a surge of panic. I tried to adapt, to use the environment to my advantage, looping back around ravines, using streams to mask my footprints, and scaling rocky ridges to find vantage points. My lungs burned, and every muscle in my body pleaded for rest, but my mind would not let me stop. Each hour, the huntsmen drew nearer, their voices crackling through walkie-talkies, coordinating a thorough sweep of the area. On 2 occasions, I was nearly spotted. Once, a flashlight beam grazed the spot where I had just hidden behind a fallen log. The second time, I heard footsteps crunching leaves close enough that I held my breath until spots danced before my eyes. When dawn broke, the men retreated to regroup. Exhausted, I collapsed beneath a thick cluster of pines and choked down a meager sip of water. It dawned on me that my one bottle was almost gone. Hunger clawed at my gut, and my limbs felt like dead weights. If I stayed on the run with no plan, I would be run ragged and cornered soon enough. My fear twisted into desperate anger. My entire life, I had avoided confrontation, but now I realized that approach guaranteed my demise. I needed a different tactic. That was when I decided to turn their game against them. If I was to be hunted, I would become the predator in my own way. I recalled glimpses of equipment sheds I had passed when first led out of the mansion grounds. I pictured the orchard to the northwest and the farmland near the stables, places that might contain tools, old machinery, or supplies. Of course, those areas were within the estate's patrol routes, but if I could slip in, I might find something to level the odds. By nightfall, I mustered the strength to double back. Drones still floated overhead, but I noticed something: they weren't as numerous as I'd feared. The estate was huge, and even advanced surveillance had its limitations. Crouching low, I skirted the tree line until I caught sight of a storage barn behind an orchard of withering fruit trees. My heart thumped at the risk, but I forced myself onward. Breaking into the barn wasn't difficult, the lock was old, and a heavy rock shattered the flimsy hasp. Inside, the sense of dust and rotted apples made me gag, but I found a battered toolbox, coils of wire, and some lengths of chain. Not exactly weaponry, but I stuffed what I could into a burlap sack. Before I could rummage further, I heard barking in the distance. Panicked, I slipped out the rear door, cursing that I hadn't found anything more useful. Something was better than nothing, though, and as I fled the orchard, I resolved to set rudimentary traps if I could. Night stretched into morning, each hour a test of my endurance and nerve. My ragtag traps slowed them, but didn't stop them. I tied wires across narrow trails at ankle height, scattered nails near muddy creek banks, and rigged a crude tripwire near a ridge, hoping someone would plunge down the slope. In some cases, I heard yelps of pain or angry shouts, small victories. Yet the net still tightened. I sensed that Alexandra was watching from her estate, enthralled by the lengths I was going to survive. Perhaps that thrilled her, made her want this chase to continue even more. She was addicted to the thrill of the hunt, and every moment I eluded her fueled her obsession. More than once, I found myself cursing the day I'd ever crossed her path. But a grim determination kept me from giving up. I promised myself I wouldn't be just another victim. Even if I died, I would make her pay with blood. On the second night, an opportunity for real sabotage presented itself. While hiding near a gravel service road, I overheard 2 guards discussing the estate's communication systems. I gathered from their terse exchange that there was a private substation powering everything from the perimeter defenses to the cameras. If I shut that down, Alexandra and her team would lose their greatest advantage. My entire body was sore, but a burst of hope surged in me. If I disrupted power, even for a few hours, I might slip away or at least cause enough havoc to strike at her directly. So I crept along the road until I saw tall wooden poles carrying thick cables. They led me to a chain-link fence enclosing a small facility bristling with transformers and wiring. I counted at least 2 guards stationed by the entrance, plus a visible camera. Breaking in would require stealth I barely possessed. But I had no better plan. Under the cover of darkness, I circled the fence, looking for a gap or a blind spot. Eventually, I found a spot where the fence was slightly bent. Using a length of wire, I twisted and pried at the chain links until I opened a narrow gap. Each metallic groan made my heart pound, certain it would alert the guards. But luck stayed with me. I slipped inside. The substation hummed with the lethal energy coursing through its transformers. I crouched behind a large metal box, scanning for an access door. Spotting a single building labeled "Control," I inched forward on trembling legs. But the camera near the door was a problem. Its lens panned with mechanical precision, covering the approach. Taking it out would be ideal, but I had no firearm, only a rusted crowbar I'd picked up earlier. Forcing an approach blindly was suicide. So I waited for the guards to shift position. Eventually, one left to smoke a cigarette. The other wandered out of sight. Adrenaline coursed through me. Keeping low, I ran to the door. Finding it locked, I jammed the crowbar under the frame and wrenched with all my strength. The lock gave with a screech, which likely echoed in the night. I rushed in, slamming the door behind me. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed, illuminating a cramped control room lined with circuit breakers and monitors. My hands shook as I scanned the labeled panels for anything referencing surveillance or power distribution. Then I heard footsteps outside. My mind raced. I spotted a large switch marked "Main Grid Access." Wasting no time, I shoved it downward. An angry klaxon blared. Lights flickered. On the monitors, I watched camera feeds go black one by one. My intrusion had triggered an alarm, but I could see the estate's defenses shutting down in real time. The door burst open, and a guard leveled his rifle at me. I dove behind a console as bullets ripped into the wall. A second guard rushed in, shouting. The crowbar was my only weapon. Gritting my teeth, I lunged forward, swinging it wildly. I felt it connect with a sharp crack against a guard's helmet. He staggered, and I tackled him. We tumbled, fists flailing, each trying to secure a killing blow. The other guard aimed at me, but his partner blocked his line of fire. In my desperation, I jammed the crowbar into the guard's side, hearing him howl in pain. The second one pulled the trigger, a bullet grazing my arm. I yelped, diving behind another console as fiery pain spread through my shoulder. Gasping, I saw a chance. The guard advanced, but I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and squeezed the trigger, blasting foam into his face. He coughed and stumbled. I bashed the extinguisher against his skull. He dropped, stunned or worse. My breath came in ragged bursts, the wound in my arm throbbing. Alarms continued to shriek, but on the monitors I glimpsed how the property's lights dimmed, cameras glitched, and automated gates froze open. If I could escape now, the entire estate might be thrown into enough chaos for me to slip away. But as I staggered to the door, I realized something crucial. Shutting down her system might grant me a chance to flee, yet Alexandra herself remained the puppeteer of this nightmare. Even cornered, she would never cease the hunt. Her private mercenaries might be limited by the blackout, but they'd still obey her every order. I found myself unable to abandon the notion of confronting her. She needed to be stopped at the source, or she would simply rebuild her empire of cruelty. The risk was colossal, but the thought of her continuing these hunts made me nauseous with rage. Clutching my injured arm, I forced my shaking legs into motion. The alarm klaxon drowned out the roaring in my ears as I slipped back into the night. With the estate reeling from the sabotage, patrols became more erratic, their coordination disrupted. I slipped between search parties, hugging the shadows. I could sense confusion among the guards. Lights flickered sporadically, and the high-tech drones were grounded. I recognized an opportunity. If I made it to the mansion, perhaps I could confront Alexandra directly. I had no illusions about my odds. She was likely guarded by a loyal cadre of mercenaries and possibly armed herself. But the fury burning in me eclipsed any hesitation. She had stolen lives for sport. Her reign needed to end. The mansion was a vast structure of modern steel and glass fused with old-world architecture. The front entrance was well guarded, so I circled around to a courtyard lined with tall hedges. There, I found a side door slightly ajar. Inside, the hallways were strewn with half-burned candles and artwork that now lay crooked from the electrical disruptions. I passed a cowering maid, who gazed at me with wide, terrified eyes. She said nothing, seeming more frightened of Alexandra's men than of me. Ascending a sweeping staircase, I crept through corridors until I reached a locked double door that bore the initials, AH, in gilded script. I heard muffled voices beyond. My pulse thundered. I tested the handle. Locked. Summoning a last reserve of determination, I drove the crowbar into the frame, prying it loose until the lock snapped. The door swung open, revealing an opulent study. Shelves lined with leather-bound books, a marble fireplace, and tall windows shrouded by heavy curtains. Near a grand mahogany desk stood Alexandra Hale, flanked by two of her personal guards. Her immaculate suit was in disarray, her hair unbound, green eyes blazing with fury. She recognized me instantly, and her scowl contorted into a mocking grin. "So you've come to finish this," she said, with forced bravado that couldn't hide the edge of desperation in her voice. Impressive. The guards aimed their rifles at me. I was pinned in the doorway, nowhere to take cover. For a moment, I believed it was over. Then the lights flickered again, courtesy of the sabotage, and the entire room plunged into darkness. The guards cursed, fumbling for flashlights. In that heartbeat of confusion, I lunged behind a couch. Muzzle flashes lit the gloom, bullets tearing into upholstery. My heart hammered so violently I expected it to burst from my chest. I had no firearm, but I still gripped the crowbar. Crawling in the darkness, I skirted the edge of the room, waiting for another flash of light to orient myself. One guard cornered me near the fireplace. I flailed the crowbar, managing to strike his arm. His rifle clattered away, but he threw a savage kick that knocked me to the ground. Pain exploded in my torso. Gasping, I rolled aside, avoiding his stomping foot by inches. As the second guard's flashlight beam swept our way, I spotted a heavy fireplace poker. My fingers closed around its handle, and I swung it upward into the first guard's face. He dropped with a choked groan. The second guard fired blindly, muzzle flare searing the darkness. Sparks danced across the walls as the bullets ricocheted. I dove behind a large wingback chair, hearing the wood splinter. Then a shrill command rang out in the dark, "Stop shooting, you imbecile." Alexandra roared, fearful that a stray bullet might strike her. He lowered his rifle, switching to a smaller sidearm with a flashlight attachment. I took that chance to hurl the fireplace poker at him. It missed, but forced him to stumble. Seizing the moment, I leapt onto him. We grappled in the flickering beam of the flashlight, both trying to control the weapon. My shoulder screamed in agony from the earlier bullet graze, but I forced everything I had into wrenching the gun away. With a final burst of effort, I tore it free. Without thought, purely on instinct, I pulled the trigger. The guard staggered, collapsing to the floor. A jolt of horror and triumph slammed through me. Breathing ragged, I turned the flashlight on Alexandra. She stood by the desk, eyes wide, a pistol of her own gripped in shaking hands. She fired once, the shot going wide, and I dropped into a crouch behind the desk. My heart hammered as I realized we were locked in a lethal standoff. You've gone farther than anyone ever has, she spat, voice trembling with rage. But you'll still die here. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain pelted the windows. In the reflection of the glass, I caught sight of Alexandra edging to the side, trying to flank me. I rose, leveling the guard's pistol at her. We stood face to face in the flickering gloom, both soaked in sweat and adrenaline. For a moment, neither of us spoke, our eyes locked. Then, in a move that defied all my expectations, she threw down her pistol and opened her arms as though inviting me to shoot. Go ahead, she challenged, her tone oddly resigned. End it. But know this, if you pull that trigger, you become just like me. A killer. Her words stuck like a thorn in my mind. My grip trembled. Part of me craved vengeance, a fiery thirst for retribution that demanded her blood. Yet I was no murderer by nature. Taking life, even in self-defense, made me recoil. She hunted humans for sport, shouldn't she pay with her own life? As I hesitated, a faint smile curved her lips. She thought her psychological ploy was working. She believed I was too weak to pull the trigger. My entire body shook with conflict. Slowly, I advanced on her, forcing her to step back until she hit the desk. Thunder rolled again, rattling the windows. She tried one last gambit. I can give you whatever you want, money, protection. This was just a twisted thrill. I never had anything personal against you. Don't let worthless pride cost you everything. Tears of rage blurred my vision. You murdered people, I hissed. You kidnapped me. You call that just a thrill? My finger tensed on the trigger. I wanted her to feel the same terror she'd inflicted. Get on your knees, I barked. She froze, then slowly lowered herself, hatred burning in her eyes. Seeing her in that position, so vulnerable, twisted my insides. Her lip quivered, fear finally breaking through her mask. Please, she whispered. The word resounded in my head. Alexandra Hale, who reveled in the agony of others, was begging for mercy. Silence stretched. My breath came in ragged gulps. The lines of morality blurred. I pressed the barrel to her forehead, my hand shaking so violently that I couldn't keep it steady. She closed her eyes, tears brimming. My heart pounded in confusion. The urge to end her was overwhelming, but a final shred of my conscience resisted. Killing her in cold blood wouldn't erase the horrors she had inflicted. Suddenly, the door behind us burst open. 2 more captives, battered and bruised, rushed in with improvised weapons. They recognized Alexandra. One, a man with a bloodied bandage around his head, lifted a scavenged shotgun. His eyes brimmed with desperation and fury. Before I could speak, he fired. The blast was deafening. Alexandra's body jerked, then collapsed against the desk. I stood there in stunned silence as blood stained the rug a dark crimson. The captive who fired glared at her fallen form, then lowered his shotgun, tears streaking his cheeks. He and his companion left without a word. I felt no victory, only a strange hollowness. The woman who had hunted me was dead, not by my hand, but by someone equally wronged. When I finally left the mansion, dawn glimmered over the broken estate. The storm clouds parted to reveal the battered grounds dotted with the wreckage of security drones, toppled cameras, and disoriented guards who were either fleeing or surrendering. Many captives were escaping, some stumbling away in tattered clothing, others guiding injured companions. I managed to scale a damaged portion of the perimeter, dropping onto the road beyond. My muscles screamed with agony, but I kept running. Eventually, I reached a main highway. Dawn broke over the horizon, casting pale light across the asphalt. A sympathetic driver stopped to help me when she saw my ragged appearance. In a blur, I climbed into her car and muttered, "Drive," and she did, eyes wide with concern. As the mansion shrank behind me, I thought of Alexandra's final moments, the fear in her voice, the quiver in her lips. She had lived by the hunt, dominated others for her twisted pleasure, but in the end, she begged for mercy like anyone else. Days later, the story exploded in the media. Authorities raided the Hale estate, rescuing surviving captives and discovering horrifying evidence of her hunts. Some guards were arrested, others disappeared. No one wept for Alexandra. In the interviews and depositions, a swirl of conflicting testimonies arose about who delivered the fatal shot. I never came forward. The official report said that in the ensuing chaos of sabotage and revolt, the heiress was shot and killed by an unknown assailant. As for me, I left that city and changed my name, seeking some measure of peace. Yet I still wake at night, remembering the orchard's pungent scent, the hum of drones overhead, and her cold smile. The memory of her final plea stays with me, a reminder that even the cruelest tyrant can be humbled. That doesn't erase the trauma, nor does it undo the damage she caused. But in a strange way, it reassures me that no one is untouchable. So long as there is courage to fight back, evil can be toppled. Alexandra Hale hunted humans for sport, until the day I, and others like me, found the strength to make her beg for mercy. Now, I struggle to move on with my life, haunted by the knowledge that monsters are real. And sometimes, their only downfall comes at the hands of those they underestimated the most. Still, there were rare moments when a sudden swell of gratitude washed over me, simply because I was free. I could choose to stare at the stars without fearing a rifle scope trained on my head. I could decide to take a train to a new city, or change my name again if I wished. Alexandra's shadow lingered, but she no longer dictated my every breath. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, would stand by a window and remind myself I wasn't trapped behind steel bars or locked gates. That realization, as small as it might seem, fueled my will to keep moving forward. It proved I had wrested my life back from her clutches, even if her memory still stalked me in the night. And with every golden sunrise, I swore I would reclaim one more piece of myself, leaving behind the despair she tried to impose on me. Though I bore scars and nightmares, they were also badges of resilience, proof that I absolutely refused to die at the hands of someone who believed she was untouchable. Though I managed to find a new beginning, it didn't come easily. I changed my hair, adopted a different style of dress, and shifted from one odd job to the next, never staying long enough in one place for questions to pile up. I'd try to sleep at night, but my dreams were haunted by muzzle flashes in the dark, the shriek of an alarm, the hum of a drone overhead. Sometimes I'd see Alexandra's green eyes staring into mine from across a campfire, and I'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat. In one of the small towns where I briefly settled, a neighbor invited me to go hunting deer in the nearby woods. I declined politely, my stomach twisting at the mere suggestion. It stirred too many memories of being chased through brambles, waiting for the crack of a rifle that would end my life. I couldn't bear the sight of a hunting rifle leaning against a pickup truck without feeling my pulse spike. Other neighbors thought I was just peculiar, a recluse who preferred solitary walks and quiet evenings. They never guessed the lines I'd crossed to survive. Occasionally, rumors reached me about the aftermath of the Hale estate. Civil suits and criminal trials bogged down in legal wrangling. Various wealthy associates of Alexandra were implicated, some facing public disgrace, others managing to escape charges. The media coverage framed it as a scandal, an example of the ultra-wealthy gone rogue. For us who endured it, though, it was a nightmare. Each time I overheard mention of the Hale mansion, my heart would pound, and I'd leave the conversation, fearing someone might piece my story together. I discovered I couldn't handle large crowds either. Any sudden movement or loud voice made me tense, ready to fight or flee. A therapist I visited encouraged me to face my fears in small steps, but how could I explain they were rooted in a private domain of cruelty? Despite the challenges, I refused to remain trapped. Step by step, I found a measure of solace in simple routines, early morning runs, volunteering at a local shelter, reading in a quiet cafe. Whenever the nightmares came, I reminded myself, Alexandra Hale was gone, her empire dismantled. She had begged for mercy in the end. I had stood against her darkness and survived. That fragile knowledge pushed me onward.